Hi, this is Qralloq and welcome to Gamers exPlane. Today I'm going to show you my interview with WarDomo in full, even though you've seen a bunch of the material before in prior videos for this season. Yeah, I think the conversation itself progresses fairly naturally despite me, asking a bunch of random questions. And watching it again, I think it just really is a great conversation. I'm happy to share it with you. So I hope that you enjoy my time that I spent with WarDomo as much as I did. So thank you, and I'll see you in an hour and 8 minutes. You and I have gamed together for a long time. As I was looking through the stats, you joined the site in August of 2016, and I created a Victorian Age vampire game September 1st, 2016, and you were one of the original players of that.
Oh.
And we played that off and on for, I think, 3.5 years.
Yeah.
You might have disappeared for a portion of the beginning of the Chicago stuff.
I was there, I think, I wasn't there when you first started it, and then I got in, and then I fell right back off.
Yeah, so how long have you been playing tabletop role-playing games in general?
So my history goes back to a kid. I was a kid. I was like 10 years old, and I don't remember how, but I got my hands on. No, I remember exactly how. I got my hands on the AD&D. Actually, no, it was probably D&D, the black box D&D set. And because I had been going to a comic book shop for a while. This was in Miami, and they had it there, and I was a big nerd, as you might imagine, and it said 10 and up, so I waited till I was 10 to get the black box. And so we played that, me and then one of my good friends growing up, and then eventually I got my hands on the AD&D second edition Player's Handbook, DM's Guide, and the Tome of Magic, and I never played it. Oh, my lighting just went. I never played it, but I read the hell out of it. There we go. And so after kind of that black box period, I didn't really play much until high school, and then I found a new group, and we started getting into like Vampire and the World of Darkness games, and so that's a lot of what we played in high school.
So not to date you or anything, but what version of Vampire would that have been?
I want to say it was second ed, but it might have been getting into revised. I mean, this was let's date it. It was like late 90s, so it was probably second edition, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, second edition I think was just really spectacular. Revised, really cleaned up some of the rules, and
yeah, it did.
And but the game changed a little bit, and I think they changed it on purpose. That the focus of the game became slightly different. Like first edition was very much personal horror. It was about fighting the beast, and then later on they just changed the tone of the game a little bit in each time.
Yeah, and then there's always that conversation about like how much meta plot is too much, and then I think the second edition maybe went too far, but I put a big asterisk on that because I always see these things as like optional. They provide it. If you want to use it, it's all there. If not, ignore it. I don't know why people make such a big deal about the meta plot being there. If you don't want to engage with it, don't. But it did have a lot. And so I could see why some people would be overwhelmed with like that many NPCs and that much canon and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy because I've got shelf after shelf downstairs. I religiously bought all the vampire books, all the mage books. This will all be about second edition, moving into revised, and werewolf books, and just so thousands of dollars in these books.
We don't think about that.
Yeah, and these books are thick, right? A couple hundred pages, but they don't have rules in them, not really. Like it was
No,
mostly
there's so
lore.
much like lore. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed that. Like
Yeah.
I enjoyed them both as a game and as just interesting fiction, you know?
Yeah. A couple of years ago, I ran a vampire game live, and it was we decided to use the 20th anniversary edition or the fourth edition,
Right.
and the um, the basis for the game was that Beckett's Guide to the Jihad had come out. This is basically just a source book, and it's all like deep lore things that would go on in the World of Darkness, particularly as they move from fourth to fifth edition lore wise. And so I decided, you know what, we're just going to play a game that's all deep lore. So we just made it elder characters, got them involved deep into the whole mysteries of existence and vampire, and just went nuts. And it
It's
was a
fun.
lot of fun. Yeah.
If you can get a group that's knowledgeable enough to play that game, that's got to be fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So how did you move from tabletop role playing into play by post? And how did you find gamers playing?
so so play by post, I had never done. No, okay, correction. I'll try not to yell my levels. But so back in high school and a little bit in college too. Um, do you remember MUDs? The
Mm-hmm.
like text-based
Yep.
role-playing game kind of. So I played a lot of those, especially in high school with a buddy of mine. And uh, and then I got into for a little while, there were there was a million varieties of them, but there was ones that were more like role play heavy versus just kind of like hack and slash. Uh, Mush is, I believe, is what
Right.
they were referred to as. Um, and so I played a couple of those. So that I guess that's a more interactive play by text based role playing, I guess. And that was fun. But then I would always like it was one of those where if you weren't always on, you were missing out, and I just couldn't keep up with it. Um, and so I would always fall off eventually. Um, and then got out of college, grew up, became like an adult type person. I don't know. That's probably still debatable. And then I just kind of dropped role playing games altogether. Like I went to grad school and nobody played and all that kind of thing. And then shortly before I found Gamers Plane, my old high school group and I tried to start up a game on over video conferencing because we're kind of scattered to the winds at this point. And so we tried to do that, and it was okay. We had a lot of technical difficulties, and so it just really wasn't satisfying. But it got that bug back in my head about playing. And I had started listening to a bunch of podcasts about tabletop role playing, and I I don't actually recall what it was that brought me to Gamers Plane, but I from listening to some of the previous interviews, I think I probably listened to the same episode of that podcast that everybody else listened to that brought them to Gamers Plane or that
Dungeon,
mentioned Gamers Plane.
Dungeon Masters block number
I
80.
think I think it was Dungeons Block. Yeah, because there was a while that I was listening to Dungeon Masters block, so it was probably that one. Um, but and so yeah, and so I just kind of found the site and kind of jumped in and really started enjoying it right out of the gate. I think my first game was there was a player who's not around anymore. He was Darth Oingo Boingo. I remember
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And just because the name cracked me up.
Yeah.
And he was running a vampire game, but it was a modern vampire game. And so I'd gotten into that and was really enjoying it. And then that started to tail off, and you jumped in to start that Victorian Age, which I had never actually played Victorian Age. A friend of mine from high school, he had the source book, he had the Victorian Age book, but we never played it. And then so I was real excited, and I finally got to play my Giovanni, which I've never played, and I was so excited about that. So thank you for humoring me on that one. And yeah, that was it. I was hooked.
Yeah, that was a good setting for a Giovanni. London by night is such a cosmopolitan city, is the largest city in the world in the Victorian times at five
Yeah.
and a half million people, with a fairly robust trade around the world. And so having an Italian person and an envoy from the Giovanni clan just really made sense. So
Yeah,
it
and
was,
at that point in the history, they don't have quite the same stigma as they do in the modern knights either, which was nice. It was there, but it wasn't like as oppressive.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So um, that got you onto tabletop role playing and into gamers playing.
Yeah.
It, have you been chasing any kind of experience in your mind, like a dream game that you would have?
So there's definitely a dream game I've got that and I tried to run it once. And for any of you who tried to join that game, I'm sorry, it fell apart. I've always wanted to play, and this goes back to high school. We've talked about doing this, a Hunters Hunted game
Okay.
in which you have two separate groups of PCs like at odds and coming after each other. And so I had tried to run it on Play by Post with a group of hunters. This all was going to be second edition World of Darkness. A group of hunters versus a group of demons. And I kind of got the hunter game off the ground. We had started, they were going to do kind of like a mystery at first just to kind of get their feet wet, while I was getting the demons going as well in kind of their own little political intrigue, and then eventually have them kind of intersect. And it just life got in the way, and then it was just a lot to do at once.
Yeah.
But I dream of that game. I think that could be a lot of fun. Very hard to manage, especially in play by post. If people get on like different time frames, you got to keep kind of like time skipping to get them at the same time.
Yeah,
But
it seems like the perfect medium for that kind of thing because all of the players are isolated, right?
mm-hmm.
It's not like having one couch of hunters and one couch of demons, and they're kind of aware of what they're doing at the table.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, we always talked mechanically, if we were to do it live, we'd have to have like two different rooms and like two GMs kind of talking across, like meeting in the hallway to discuss what was going on. Like, no way, that's never going to happen.
yeah.
Maybe at a con or something, but like, no way.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one of the strengths of play by post is doing things in real life, or that in real life would just be
Just not feasible.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So and then of course my secondary thing was I would at some point I'd love to play Exalted. Um, I I always run it because I'm like the only one that runs it, that I'm aware of. Maybe they're hiding out there. Please find me. Um, and yeah, so I'd love to play it sometime.
I played Exalted in real life a long time ago now. Got to be 13, 14 years. Would have been,
Yeah. That would have been second edition. Yeah.
I think so. And
yeah, the only time I ever played it was first edition, like way back in the day, like 2000. I want to say 2002, 2001, something like that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We didn't get very far. We maybe played 3 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the the group just self-destructed for various reasons. But
yeah, I got one good Exalted game on GP, with third edition, that went for a pretty good while. I think we got through a whole story arc, and then it just kind of fizzled from there. And then I tried to start up one using they published this starting adventure thing called the Tomb. No, it's not Tomb of the Five Corners. That was the previous edition's Jumpstart, whatever the Jumpstart is called. But it's not. I don't think it's a particularly good adventure. In particular, it doesn't showcase Exalted very well because it like happens in this pocket dimension kind of thing. So it's not in the setting, which is kind of the whole thing of Exalted is the setting, really. So I've got one game, and I'm trying to start the second for I'm doing an intro game for they published Exalted Essence, which is like a rules lighter version of third edition. It's still not light, but it's far less crunchy than third ed is. And so we're kind of getting that going now.
I think um, Exalted is one of those games where I think it makes intuitive sense. At least it did in second edition. And I've tried to play third edition with you, and it's hard to learn complex, crunchy games on play by post because you touch the system so infrequently. And
yeah, for sure.
And there's a lot of terminology like excellencies that don't make intuitive sense. They don't have a plain English meaning. And so I was always fighting lingo.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And third edition is I think it's a fantastic system. It's very crunchy. There's a lot of fiddly bits, and a lot of things to learn. So it's definitely not new player friendly. So I get it. I totally do.
So have you been playing live games in the last 2 years?
I have. I've managed to find a group through my library here, and we've run a few things. I ran a short-lived Exalted game. It was okay. We had some player issues on that one. Some D&D, 5th ed. We ran. We tried to play the Dragon Age game, and we got like one session in, and it fell apart. And then I ran a Hunter the Vigil second edition game. Well, it was a Chronicles second edition, and then we migrated to Hunter from there. Because I've been backing like the Kickstarters lately, and so whenever they release the manuscript, I'm like, let's play. And then we muddle through their like disorganized manuscript that's not laid out and doesn't have the tables or anything. You're just trying to do the best you can with what you got.
Yeah, I remember play testing Vampire 5th edition, and the rules
was that on GP? I played a playtest of 5th ed. I think we were in the same game.
Yeah, it was probably me running it, set in Germany, and
that was it. Yeah,
it was awful. Like their scenario, the rule set, all of it, just none of it made for easy sailing.
Because it was only like a portion of the rule. It like only had like the combat rules, I think, right? And even then, it was dumbed down. It wasn't great.
Yeah.
Although I'm in a 5th ed game now on GP no, okay, we're just getting it started. But I'm hoping to get a better taste of what 5th edition has to offer. I like the hunger dice mechanic. I think that's very clever.
I do as well. Yeah, for sure. It brings back that hunger that kind of went away from first and second edition.
Yeah.
Third and fourth, it just kind of vanished almost as being a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it was only a problem if you like chose to make it part of the story,
Yeah. So when you're playing live games and play by post games simultaneously, what do you miss from live games when you're playing online?
I'd say with live games, you get a lot more spontaneity. I'm not great at prep, so I end up just kind of coming up with a lot of things on the fly, and stories end up going places I don't expect. And you also get a lot more, for better or worse, you get a lot more table talk, and just kind of fun moments, right? But on the flip side, with play by post, one of the things I love is that you have a minute to think about it, and you can, especially as the GM, you have the opportunity to like get your rules right, but then be like take nuance into account and go back 3 pages of posts and go like, what did I say? I remember I dropped a hint over there. I don't want to lose that. And so I feel like I have a more cohesive I'm able to put together a more cohesive story, or guide a better story on play by post.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the spontaneity at a live table, something I do miss in play by post. I was saying this on the weekend to somebody else that playing GMing live on the seat of your pants, like if you're a low prep GM like yourself and like I am, there's this pressure cooker, right? There's this, this excitement that you have to come up with something now, and your brain responds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoy that, being on the edge and having to guide a good story on the seat of your pants.
Yeah.
But it, like you said, it doesn't allow for the depth of story that you can tell on play by post by carefully crafting things.
Yeah. And to your point, like I enjoy that. I like, it energizes me, and I find fun moments there, but it's also draining. Like I'll get out of a game session, I'm like, I need a nap. I'm tired. Maybe because I'm old. But yeah, it takes a lot of energy mentally for me to run games like that. And then I get like anxiety before running sessions because I'm like, I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know, is this gonna be good? Is this gonna be bad? I don't, I don't know.
No, I get that too. Like, especially when, a half dozen people show up in your house and okay, we're going to start gaming at 6. We'll probably game till like 1 a.m. And you're like, I've got nothing, right? I've, I was planning on doing some prep today, but I wasn't in the mood. And now I'm not
100%.
entirely in the mood. And now I got to entertain these people for 7 hours. And
Yeah.
usually it worked out, but
Or you'll get into like halfway through that session and now you've run out of stuff and you're like, oh man, I had like 3 scenes. I had 3 scenes ready. Like you blew through them.
yeah. So, what is your GM prepping style for creating the next section or the beginning of a play by post campaign or adventure?
I try to come up with set pieces. I have what I really try to avoid is coming up with the path that these players are going on. And we won't get into railroading because I don't know. That's short of like just straight up telling your players, no, you can't do that. I don't really think railroading is a thing. Gently nudging them along the track is totally a thing. But yeah, so I try to come up with, the big, for lack of a better term, set pieces of like, I think they're going to meet this character. I need to get them this information to move this story along. And then I just try to logically connect those pieces to where they have been. I try as much as possible to let the characters do what they're doing organically, and then okay, so they did this. What are the logical consequences of their actions? And then how does that connect to the grander story? Does it affect the big bad? If so, how does that entity respond? That kind of thing, and try to let that drive the story.
Yeah, I think that's similar to what I do as well, in that really the beginning of the story is setting the first scene, setting the dominoes, getting the broader world kind of set up in your mind, and then you can follow the story, follow the players logically, and still have a living world that responds regardless of what they're doing.
Yeah, I've been trying to. I don't know. Have you seen? There's a YouTube channel called How to Be a Great GM. Guy Slanders, I think is his name. And he's got a whole series on like how to come up with your campaign, and it all starts with the sentence, right? And the sentence is someone wants something, and and by a certain time, and all these like something and someone's are blanks, right? You just got to fill in the blanks. Someone wants something by a certain time, but they're having difficulty doing so, or by doing something, and they're having difficulty doing so because of someone or something. And you just fill in those like 6 or 7, however many blanks it is, and then you just kind of start asking questions about that sentence, and it builds kind of the world and the challenges that your players will be faced with when they are then inserted into the story, right? He makes the example with Lord of the Rings, right? If Lord of the Rings were a tabletop game, right? Well, I know it's a tabletop game, but if that story were a tabletop game, the PC group is our fellowship, right? Frodo et al. But the sentence is like Sauron is trying to take over the world, but by gathering the southern tribes and the orcs and the goblins, but he's having difficulty doing so because he doesn't have a physical body, and the armies of Middle Earth are fighting against him. None of that has to do with Frodo, right? That's just the world into which Frodo gets placed, and then the story is Frodo getting there, right? So it's the same idea. So I like having kind of that world, and then just, okay, here you go. Release you into the maze. Go for it. Where do you go?
Yeah. That's a great idea. I've often looked at random adventure generators to kind of spontaneously create something like that. Like here's a paragraph or something that describes the world, and then you just find a place to kind of fit your players in beside that or around that, and then they can follow their own nose into the greater plot, if they will.
Yeah, I have an on and on again, off again relationship with random generators. Like I always wanted, especially I had a period there where I was really keen on trying to get a sandbox, like a hex crawl type sandbox game going. And I was like, I just gathered all these random tables. I'm like, it's gonna be great. We're gonna randomize everything. It's gonna be total chaos. It's gonna be great. Nah, just fell apart.
Yeah.
I'm all ideas and no execution.
So you've got all these ideas as a GM, and you said you really want to be a player and Exalted. But when you see a new game system, what's your thought process on deciding whether or not you want to be a player or a GM first?
I generally want to be a player first, just because there's so many things to do when you're a GM that if you don't have to be a rules master to GM, but if you're a complete newbie on it with everything else you're trying to juggle, I don't enjoy that. I don't enjoy that game. So when I'm GMing, I want to be able to focus on the players and the story, and not on the mechanics. I want to be comfortable enough with the mechanics to do that. That's why that's another game that I've been wanting to run forever is the Atomic Robo game that's based on Fate, but I've never played Fate. And so I think it seems like a very fun game. I've read it, but Fate's very different from anything else I've ever played. And so I really want to play that first, and then, maybe run it.
Yeah, I've got Atomic Robo. I think I've gotten it in a couple bundles or random
Yeah, I got it
collections.
in a bundle. Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks great. I'm really a fan of kind of like a post-apocalypse kind of style of game, but anyway.
It's got a really great humor about it too, which I appreciate.
Yeah. And like you said, Fate is it's just it's a sticky wicket. So it takes some grokking to kind of really get the flow of the currency between fate points and tagging aspects. And
and that's like, because it bills itself as a lighter system, right? And it is generally, but the lighter a system gets, the more I think is expected of the GM and the players to carry that narrative load that a dice roll would cover in a lot of other systems, right? And that's even more reason why I'm intimidated to run it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Genesis system, the Star Wars Genesis system. Like, I get it kind of, but in play, I worry that if I'm like on the fly trying to figure out like, okay, what do these dice mean? Okay, it's succeed but with failure, but with a challenge. I can't. It's too much for me.
Yeah. I think my intuition on this, because I've played Genesis and I've played Star Wars and I've played the Legend of the Five Rings, 5th edition, that uses a similar narrative dice, is that a lot of getting through that complexity about success with failure and that sort of thing comes from having done it 50 times before. And so you've got this pool of knowledge, a pool of memory on the cool things you can do with those twists.
Which is why I need to play it. See?
Yeah. What kind of balance do you look for in a play-by-post game? Do you tend to look for more action heavy? Do you want more drama and dialogue between NPCs and in between players? Or do you like to explore mysteries and investigations with your players?
Yeah, I tend to fall farther on the role play, drama, and mystery type stuff, particularly for play by post, because combat can drag play by post down to a grind, really bad. And maybe that's just the way I run. Maybe I run combat poorly, but and it's also funny to say because I'm like the Exalted guy, and Exalted's all about like high flying combat. I just hit my microphone. So what I don't shy away from combat. I'm not going to add superfluous combat just for funsies. Like if I was running 5th ed, I'm not running like random monster tables. No way. Because that all of that's just taking away from moving the plot forward. And these games take long enough as it is to move along without having to just add extra fluff. So if I'm going to have a combat, I want it to be meaningful. I want it to have story implications and that kind of thing.
Yeah, combat is tricky, like you said. Did you play 7th Sea 2nd edition?
Mm-hmm.
No. Can't remember.
I think I own the book. I don't.
It might have been McNeil 5 ran it, and very high action game, all about swashbuckling.
Like a swashbuckling game, right?
Yeah, and so the combat, and I'm running a 7th Sea game right now loosely, and it really kind of sets up every time you want to do an action scene. You set up a risk. Why are the players rolling? They're only rolling dice to avoid some kind of risk, right? Like maybe taking damage because something's on fire or what have you.
Yeah.
And then the GM says, okay, well, you're going to make this roll. You describe your approach. We'll make a roll, but first I'm going to set up some opportunities for you. And so if you get extra successes in your roll, then you can buy these opportunities. So then the players can then craft the scene, the action scene, right, and describe themselves doing something ludicrous or very entertaining.
Yeah.
And that all sounds great, and it probably works really fast at the table. But I think in play by post, it ends up adding a level of a series of interactions between the players and the GMs that
what in person would have been just like a couple of back and forth questions. Yeah, I could see that getting clunky. And Chronicles of Darkness 2nd edition, that's New World of Darkness, right? They have a whole thing now. I think they started in 2nd ed where any combat is going to start with motivations. It's a similar concept. Are you trying to run away? Are you trying to kill this person? Are you trying to just scare them? You know, and what's interesting there is it has consequences for what you can do in the fight too. Um, you know, so if you it allows outs from the fight that don't involve just to, you know, somebody's left standing at the end, which is nice. Um, that also has some shades of like the stunting in Exalted as well, which they've expanded with Essence. Exalted third edition had the stunting; you just get extra dice for doing cool stuff and describing it well, which is really nice for play by post, especially because you have the
Yeah.
you know the space to kind of really describe what you're doing. But they've added a thing in Essence where instead of taking those dice, you can kind of cash them in to then like add something to the scene or change the narrative in some fashion. You know, and a lot of games I'm seeing now have some sort of kind of what do they call it? Uh, kind of like a dramatic twist mechanic where the player can introduce something to the scene that way, which is I think that's a fun way of doing it.
I ran a Feng Shui game back in
Never
the,
played Feng Shui. I've heard good things about it though.
yeah, coming soon to a Gamers Plane near you. Anyway, I
It's
ran this.
actually supported. We have Feng Shui's in there.
Yeah, yeah. Kelleth built that dice roller for me, and I
I have
ran.
I have never played a
Yeah.
game on Gamers Plane that actually has the character sheets.
So the game I ran, I used a it was a superheroes game. So I took like superhero based shticks, um, modified, gave players just a lot of leeway to create whatever they wanted, and use the rules roughly to just support that. But then we were just basically using the feng shui narrative or combat system, action system. But then I gave, so as part of the game, you characters get a number of fortune dice. So some players that are very powerful get very little fortune to start, whereas other ones, like the Everyman Hero,
Mhm.
which is basically like Kurt Russell playing Kurt Russell in Big Trouble in Little China, get
In every movie Kurt Russell's ever been in.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Feng Shui is very much. I always thought of Big Trouble in Little China, the role playing game. It just anyway the he gets that character type gets 10 fortune dice. So instead of fortune dice, I printed off these action cards, and they all had like these dramatic twists on them. And I just at the beginning of each session, I just handed them out to players and say, okay, so you get 5 of these, you get 7. And some of them would be like new weapon, or um, they were just random words, almost like adopted or something like
Kind of
that, right?
prompts.
Yeah. And so the players could play these cards for regular fortune dice, or they could change the plot, right?
Mhm.
They could play that card, and then they would say why that card was true in the scene, and we just go with it. And it was wonderful. Like just giving players the tools to shape the scenes,
Mhm.
just made things come alive in much more ways than just a GM running things alone.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah.
So you've had a couple games that just didn't work, you said, like they
Oh, sure.
ran out of steam. I've had lots too. And do you have any tips for dealing with a game that you think is failing or flagging or?
Um, I think patience is a common theme across a lot of these conversations. Um, uh, Patience and persistence. So just kind of keep pinging the forum. You know, make sure people know that someone is still waiting on a response. Yeah. Because what I've found happens is you get hung up with someone is not participating, and then people don't want to like move the story past that person because that's rude, right? Um, but then they stop posting. The person that originally stopped posting is now not posting. you as the GM, like you're waiting on everybody. So I think you have to have, well, now I'm making this up as I'm speaking, but what I think you need to try and do is have that conversation earlier, probably when the game starts, and just set some expectations of beyond just posting limits, because that's nice. Posting, say, hey, everybody, what do we? Everybody says once a day or 5 times a week or whatever, and then you always fall off that. But just having the expectation of like, look, if this is going over a week and I haven't heard from anybody, I'm going to move it along, or, I'll try to reach out to you, but something, because if they're not going to move forward, you have to, or it will die. That if you lose that inertia, or momentum, I'm not good at physics, whatever it is that, you get this negative feedback cycle where it just will grind to a halt if someone doesn't break it. And I think it's incumbent on the GM for it to be you.
Yeah, that's for sure. I've seen games where there's just one player who is super motivated and keeps it running, and it even goes so far as to recruit players to replace them for the GM, and the GM is perfectly capable of doing that. But hey, you've got a willing assistant, so
yeah. I don't know, this may sound bad. I think another thing that can help, maybe not help, but maybe a preventative measure, is I think the easier it is to get into the game, the higher the likelihood you're going to get a couple of people that are very excited and then never post. That's a side benefit I've found of some of the Exalted games, is if you can get through the character creation period, which can take a while, then you're probably going to play because you're invested now. Whereas, 5th ed, everybody's got like 6 characters they've already rolled up in the hopper ready to go. Like, oh, and if not, okay, I'm a dwarf bard. Okay, got it. And so, what's your name? I don't know, Dwarf 3. That's my name. So I think having a little bit of investment can go a long way. And then even then you're still dealing with everybody in real life, things are going to happen.
Yeah. So dealing with people is always hard. The internet is, of course, the cornerstone of personality clashes. Yeah. Do you have any, have you had any experience with dealing with other players on play-by-post that just don't see things the same way as you do? The first, I've asked this question a number of times, and it occurs to me that the reason I'm asking this is that a number of people I've run into have seriously considered leaving Gamers Plane because of a personality clash. And just because it makes you rethink your own, it's not that you always think you're right. It's that sometimes you think you're wrong, and maybe you're just doing the wrong thing with your life with play-by-post gaming. And
that hit home. I got deep.
And I've had this experience, so it's not in a vacuum. Are you a good enough role player? Are you an adult even? Mm-hmm. Do you have the tools do you have the tools to deal with other people at all? I mean, all these things get called into question when something just really awful happens, and it doesn't even have to be traumatic. It's just unexpected. And so when people do, it occurs to me that most of these are because we're dealing with these multiple layers of interface between real people, and we don't have the tools to decode what the other people are actually saying. And so we're interpreting what they're saying, which might have been badly said and spoken in the first place. And anyway.
Yeah, uh, I remember I had a situation with, and it was
No names.
admittedly I was having trouble being active on Gamersplane. And so I had like started a game and then kind of fell off. And someone that was in my game got very vocal and like annoyed um, about the. I remember they made a whole thing about people you know canceling games and things, um, and it got to me. And it's partially because I feel uh, I have a bit of anxiety, and then I just kind of feel bad when things get in the way and you can't check your games as much as you want, or those things. And then you kind of there hits this tipping point where oh, I've been gone too long. Now I can't come back. I remember you had a conversation. I forget now the person's name, but they talked about how they changed their name
Yeah.
and then came back. And I get it. Like, I thought about doing that at one point. And because I had been gone for a while. Then I tried to come back and got excited and tried to start games, and then like within 2 months I fell off again. And then I felt really bad for having done all that. Because I've been on the other side of that too, where a game falls apart and you're like, oh man, I spent all this time coming up with this character and all this stuff, and now it's all for naught. So I think that's been the bigger hurdle for me, is less dealing with other people. I think there's something to what you were saying, and it's more about you know questioning whether I even should get back in there or not.
Well, and you should, right?
Yeah, I should, and I am, because you pinged me. So yeah, that's how I, after my most recent hiatus, Qralloq is the one that brought me back, because he pinged me on Discord. He's like, "Hey, you've got like two screen." Actually, that's probably why I have two screen names on Discord. He's like, "You should get rid of one of them." I was like, "Oh yeah, Gamersplane. I missed that place." Because
Yeah.
apparently I've been there for 5 years.
Yeah, it's crazy how time moves. Um, very soon I'll have my 7th anniversary. And a lot of games, a lot of people.
Yeah.
So tips for dealing with ghosting players. I feel like we've already kind of talked about that a little bit. Players disappear. Maybe they've got complex lives, or maybe they just aren't having fun, so they just throw a smoke bomb and
Sure.
and they're gone. But it happens. Sometimes players. The problem with ghosting isn't the player leaving; it's not knowing that the player's left.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah,
Two
that
weeks 2 weeks gone by, and you're like, this guy's got a complicated life. I know it, right? But how hard is it to log on and say can't post?
yeah, that's easy to say, and I feel it sometimes too. But I've definitely been on the other side of the coin, where I'm just, you mean to and you never do. And then that kind of,
Yeah.
it keeps, one more day goes by, a week goes by, and all of a sudden you haven't been on in 3 months. um I would say, for the players that are still in the game, I think you have to just have a certain amount of uh err on the side of empathy. you know Go ahead, and it costs you nothing to assume that this person has something legitimate going on. And whether that's true or not, you probably will never know. And it saves your sanity a bit. uh I had a friend who used to say, when you get stuck behind someone driving very slow, rather than flying into a rage and getting mad, just assume that they've got like a really delicate cake in the back, and that's why they're turning really, really slow, because it's going to fall over if they don't. And so it's silly, but you assume something like that, give them a reason that you can empathize with, and it's really about saving your own mental state about it, right? That person's doing whatever they do. These are games. Ultimately, these are games. I love them. I want them to go on, but they're games, and people have kids, people have, significant others that get sick or themselves getting sick, especially in the past year, Jesus. Um, just assume that and make a concerted effort to be like, hey, are you okay? Can you post? If they're on Discord or something, reach out. If not, leave them a message, say, hey, I'm sorry, I tried to wait. I want to keep this game going and happy to have you back when you get back. And leave it at that. Give people an in to come back. Because that's the hard part too, is eventually you hit that point where now you feel bad, you don't want to come back, and then you're really not gonna get back in.
Yeah, one of my GMs has got that policy. In fact, it's taken a little bit farther in that he's left a person in the game who's actually been banned from the site. So that's pretty optimistic.
Wow, yeah, that's next level. Good for them.
Yeah, I had the driving of the cake. I've got the exact same story. Is that the person that's driving slowly ahead of you? For the way I picture it, though, is maybe for reasons that you don't understand. Their vehicle is filled with 3/4 full cups of water, and they're all balanced precariously across the vehicle.
They're on their way to a marathon. They got to hand them out.
It doesn't matter. They've got some reason for having, adopted this water transportation policy, and
there you go.
it's not their fault that they're driving slowly. It is the fault of the person behind them that refuses to go around, though. Sure. You can be mad at that person. So, do you have a favorite character that in Play by Post? And I think this is both looking at characters from a player perspective and from a GM side as well.
Sure. Yeah, two definitely come to mind. One of which is my Giovanni from that game, Vittorio. He was pretty awesome. But I had another one, and it was very short-lived because it was from this game called Reflections, which Genesis spoke about in his and I'm proud to say that is the only duel to this day that ever ended. We have the only game that actually finished on Gamers Plane for Reflections. But it was excellent. It was so for those who haven't seen that episode, it's a narrative game that tries to play off of the tropes of the samurai movie, right? And it's all about a duel. And you only roll dice one time at the end of the game to resolve the duel. Everything up to that point, you're establishing kind of the scenes and points along the story that got you to this duel. It's inevitable that the two characters will fight and one will die. But how did you get there, right? And so you take turns kind of starting these scenes, and each scene you kind of have these little goals you're trying to you set goals for yourself, and then depending on whether you achieve them, your dice pool changes for the end. But the game was fascinating because it was I kind of turned it on its head, and instead of making it two samurai fighting, it was a samurai played by Genesis and his paramour. Oh. It was a female character, and so the first few scenes were establishing kind of that love story, and then then they were star-crossed, and they were from different clans that were then fighting when there was overturned the whoever was the daimyo had been, there was a coup or something. But anyways, and so his clan killed her father, and then that's where the conflict begins, right? And it was really, really, to his credit, it was extremely well written. And I just really, to this, I recently got back into that forum for that game to try and to play it again, and I read through that old duel. It was great. I really enjoyed it. I don't know if that's public or not. But if it is, you should read it. It was good. I'm proud of it.
Yeah, I've that setup just sounds amazing. That intense personal conflict.
Yeah,
I mean, it sounds like that's what the game is really about, is setting up, making it personal.
100%.
And
Yeah,
then, you've just dialed it up a whole bunch there.
yeah. As far
So
as players I've had, I'm trying to think of. I'm sure there's been plenty. I remember that then one of the exalted the main exalted game that I ran, I had a player. Oh, it's gonna bother me that I'm not remembering the name right now. But they were like they rode a wolf god was their like mount, and they used whips as their weapons, and that person was really good with the mechanics of Exalted Third Edition, so they were very good at like there's ways of like transferring battle advantage between yourself and your mount while you're fighting, and then you would do these crazy, I think it was he, forgive me if I got the pronouns wrong, you do these crazy like maneuvers where you would just unleash these attacks with the mount. It was amazing. It was just really fun.
yeah, that sounds cool. um, so DMs that made you admire their way of thinking is a question I've been asking. And it's like innovative things that DMs have done for you in play by post that have really got you thinking about just the meta level running of a game, maybe.
Yeah, I saw that one on your list, and I had trouble coming up with it. I've enjoyed many games. I'm just trying to think of like things that occurred in a game that I was like, oh yeah, let's take that and run with it. Um,
We can certainly skip that one.
yeah, nothing big comes to mind. Uh, and I don't know if that's. I wonder how much of that is it's because you don't sometimes you don't see behind the curtain of
Yeah.
how people are putting the game forward. Um, uh, yeah.
Some of the answers I've gotten have involved solo play, where you started a game. Bedzone 2, who I'm going to be talking to tomorrow, actually,
Oh,
he's got this great. He starts a game, and he'll start all the players as in individual threads, and he'll slowly weave them together. And so then a new thread will start up and be like X plus Y, and then a third character and it's X plus Y plus Z. And slowly at the end of it, by the time it gets everybody together, that's the start of the game. So at this point, you've just really established this long backstory. Not even
see,
that long.
I've tried something like that, especially in games. I tried to do it in one of those Exalted games because character creation takes a long time, and so some people would get done faster than others. So I would try to like do a little prologue with them, and then I was never able to like mesh it back. I'm curious to see how he pulls that off. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, he did it pretty well. We're playing a fifth edition D&D game, but it's a homebrew Dark Sun content, and so we've been playing it for quite a while now. But that was how he started it. Going back through it, there's like 25 individual threads as he slowly wove everybody together.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Another hard one that I haven't gotten satisfying answers on is
Oh, I'm happy to disappoint.
growing gamers playing. Have you experienced play by post on other sites?
Not really. I I think I went one time onto there was like there was an Exalted specific play-by-post site because I was trying to get into a game so I could play one. And it was very kind of insular. It was really tough to get in to anything. Everybody like had their games and nobody was starting anything. And there wasn't a lot of like community forums like we've got on Gamersland where people talk about other stuff. So there was nowhere to like interact with any of the people on it either. So I ended up just kind of letting it go. But so yeah, I really haven't been out there. I mean, I think there's opportunities for there's a lot of game specific forums that are not play by post forums, where I know it's maybe tacky is the wrong word, but it can be, there's kind of a negative connotation towards like going onto another site and advertising for a different site. I know in some places that's definitely not welcome. But I think for some of these sites where play by post is not their goal, like rpg.net or the Onyx Path forums, that kind of thing. I think in one of the times that I was trying to start up Exalted, I think I posted on one of those sites to be like, hey, I'm starting this up. I'd love to get people to come over. It's tough too because it's the internet, right? Those are wildcards, and they may show up and then disappear immediately because they're not kind of in the community either. So I'm a bigger fan of trying to bring in people that like I've definitely done that. For a while, I had a friend, Dwarf Warlock, who was playing on the site for a while, and then life happened for him too, and he kind of dropped off as well right around when I did. So, but that way, the person, you can bug them, so you can you have a higher hit rate, I think, of getting them into the community and staying in the community.
Yeah. I've tried to poach my friends and none of them are biting.
Yeah,
Other
that
than
was my one success out of like 6 or 7 people I tried to bring over, and they're like, you gotta like read. No, no thanks. I get it. It's not everybody's thing.
So Exalted is a tough bag of hamsters to get going. But
Yeah.
what do you think is the best system for you in play by post?
Um,
And you can say Exalted.
yeah, well, I don't know if that's the right answer. Um, I think it plays better than I would have expected with how crunchy it is. And I love that it has the systems for the social and all that stuff a little more fleshed out than some other games do. I still fall back on my original love of the storytellers. Well, it's still storyteller system, right? Exalted, but the World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness systems. Particularly, I really think they've done some great things with the second edition of the Chronicles of Darkness stuff. I'm reserving my judgment on 5th Ed Vampire because I really haven't engaged with the system well yet. But I think those systems that encourage narrative and encourage the players kind of adding to the narrative and not and having mechanics that support your character pursuing their own personal goals in addition to the plot goals. Chronicles has that whole system of aspirations. The older World of Darkness stuff had kind of the virtue and vice system, but the aspirations encourage you to have things that you're striving to that encourage the player to do something beyond just react, to be proactive in driving story. And I think that plays really well with play by post. I'm not a fan of 5th edition personally. Everybody go have fun. I can't get into it. I'll play it, but I just can't get into it. And I feel like it doesn't play well, particularly in play by post, unless you're really getting engaged with battle maps and things. And I don't like doing that much. So it's just not my jam. So if I had to pick, if gun to my head, you asked me to pick a system, I'll probably still pick Exalted because I'm apparently have Stockholm syndrome with regard to it. But other than that, I would probably play a World of Darkness game. And if you want to start a mage game, please. I've always wanted to play mage. I've never played mage.
I have run 2 mage games.
Because you don't have enough games going.
I've run 2 mage games. The first one was Mage the Awakening, so the first edition Chronicles game. And we set it for reasons that made sense at the time in 16th century Moscow during the reign of Ivan the Terrible, or maybe it was Ivan the Third. Anyway, I really got engaged in that game as the GM. Loved it, just dug deep into the history, created a wonderful setting, and then we kind of got lost in the
Had that happen.
It was nobody else could really imagine beyond what I was typing what life in 16th century Moscow was actually like.
Yeah, that's tough. I couldn't tell you what. I have no idea what 16th century Russia is like.
Yeah. So then I ran a Mage the Ascension game set in Las Vegas.
There you go.
And that went a lot better. But
yeah,
maybe after 6 months or so, the game just kind of, a couple players left, had a hard time. And so we just folded it eventually.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really love about the modern settings of World of Darkness is because everybody knows that setting for the most part. You may not know the meta plot stuff, but like Las Vegas. Even if I've never been to Las Vegas, but like you've seen pictures, you've seen it in movies, so you have a concept of what Vegas is, versus, if we're in Dragonlance, like unless you've read those books, you don't really know, so I have a hard, and Exalted I know because I've read we talked about having the thousands of dollars of source books. I've read them all, so I just have that. But I can imagine it's hard for new players to come in and be like, wait, there's how many pages of backstory on this? Hard pass.
Yeah.
So
I found it hard because I ran a mage game back in about 2000. And it was in university, and it was just a really great game. Just love the system. I love the lore of Mage more than any of the other games. And then when I ran Mage the Awakening using the Chronicles, and for those who are unfamiliar, they basically just blew up the world and then recreated it and said, okay, we're going to take the same ideas, but completely different lore. And it wasn't compatible, right? And so I had a hard time unlearning everything.
I struggled with that with Vampire the Requiem. I was like, wait a second, it's like kind of Vampire the Masquerade, but not. It has some terms, but they're not the same.
Yeah.
I really struggled with that.
Yeah. And, Mage the Awakening had some brilliant concepts like the towers that exist in the other planes of existence. And that's the kind of stuff I just loved about Mage, was the reality bending. And anyway.
Yeah, I've always loved the concept of that game. I've just never had a chance to play it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me today. I'll stop the recording here.
All right, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, thank you, WarDomo, for joining me, Qralloq, on Gamers exXplane. I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I did. Some great insight into the process of how this season has come together. Essentially, you see that I prepared everybody by asking them or sending them a list of questions, and then we kind of just walk through them as we talked. But WarDomo I hadn't talked to before, so we got to talk about a lot of new stuff too. Anyway, thanks again for joining me on Gamers exXplane. And we will see you next time. Thank you.